welcome to the Business Brunch and our conversation this morning on how to build a brand, legal experts and creative minds working together. My name is Simon Barker. I head up the IP and media team for Freeths, which is a top 50 law firm. We have offices across the UK and we act for a full range of clients from startups to household names with some amazing brands to boot. I'm joined this morning by Rhian Banks, who is a senior trademark attorney and solicitor in the IP and media team, and one of our leading experts in protecting and building value in brands. I'm also delighted to be joined by Andy Wilkinson, who is the founder and MD of OWB, creative marketing and digital design agency celebrating, I think, your 21st year this year, Andy, in business. Massive experience working with and launching new and amazing brands from startups and established brands over that time. So, without further ado, on to our conversation. Andy, if I can ask you first, what are the first things you look at when you're starting out with a client who wants to devise a new brand?
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, 21 years this year, as you say. So we've chosen a great year in last year to be 20 years and 21 years this year. I think the first thing in creating a brand, the absolute first thing is research, is looking at what the client wants to achieve with their brand, whether or not this is an evolution of a brand, whether this is a revolution, something completely new. It's then aligning and researching their target audience. Who do they want this brand to appeal to? How will it appeal? How will it be seen? And what kind of media will that brand roll out in? And then it's critical, once we start unpicking the research and the background to this brand and where this brand is going to appeal, it's then starting to think about what's that brand personality. What's the perception with either existing customers, new customers, if it's looking for new customers. Actually, one of the things that we tend to use with a new brand is quite often we try to create archetypes of, if the brand were a person, what person would it be? So it gives the audience, it gives the client and it gives us a really clear idea. Do they want this brand to be, a John Major? Do they want this brand to be a Boris Johnson? Do they want this brand to be a Tony Blair? How does this brand want to appeal? What kind of audience are we trying to get to? And that's quite interesting, is thinking about the personable side, because that's very human. And then when we start getting into the actual brand itself, we start to think about, how that brand is going to look, how it's going to stand out, what it's going to begin to shape like creatively, whether or not it's going to be a logo, whether or not it's going to be an identity, whether it's going to have a strap line. And then we start to get into the complexity of, as I said earlier, the media. Where will this brand sit? Will it be online? Will it be used in social media? Will it be international? And that's where I think we then start to partner with a great firm like Freeths, and your insight, your experience, and critically, the legal considerations of the brand.
Okay, so there's a lot of research that goes in ahead of all, before you get to any kind of legal considerations as to what your target audience is, the personality of the brand, and all of that. It's really, really interesting, because I guess from a legal point of view, the key thing for us is when you start to get to the point about what's the brand actually going to look like. The question for us is whether or not you can actually use it in its fixed kind of form and not get sued, to be really blunt about it. And I think that's where we start to work with somebody like yourself and with you on particular projects around that kind of piece. And I think, Rhian, you've got some great experience of legal clearance work. Do you want to talk to us about what that actually involves?
Yes, I think clearance of a brand is really important. It's actually key to the protection of it overall, because as Simon has said, if you can't actually use it, well, it's no starter. You don't want to invest all that money in developing the brand with someone like Andy if it turns out that it's a no-go from the beginning. You can instruct someone like me or Simon, and we can do all singing or dancing register clearance searches. We can do searches online, and all these different things we can do from a legal point of view, but fundamentally, I think the first port of call, an easy thing to do is just to plug in into an online search engine and just put in the proposed name and see if anyone's already got a domain name registered or if there's any use on social media. And that will give you a kickstart or an immediate red flag if there's anything that you should be considering before you proceed with any further technical legal checks.
I would think that's really good advice, Rian, because it is all about protecting your investment at the end of the day, which we'll probably come to later on in this conversation. And as you say, you don't want to invest in something unless you can use it. And I think that's why we and Andy work together quite well early on, isn't it, to make sure that that investment piece is the money that the client wants to spend is well spent from the outset. But there are practical clearance considerations too, as well, right? And some awful examples in the press over the years with even big brands like McDonald's getting caught out with I'm loving it translated into Arabic and pardon any sensibilities, but I'm meaning I'm a bitch and things like that. And I know we've got loads of other examples here. But Andy, what are the kind of practical considerations along those lines? I mean, we obviously do clearance for that kind of thing as well, but when you talked about international registration, looking at what the actual target audience of the market is, what are the considerations from a practical marketing point of view?
This, I think, goes into quite an interesting area of where the brand is being developed from. If the brand is quite often being developed as part of a larger established organization, there will be historical context which you can work within. There will be very strong brand guidelines. Quite often there will already have been brands registered and will have sort of sitting within a context. The difficulty and the excitement is when it's a brand new brand. If it's a startup, certainly you'll see a lot in the sort of e-commerce .com world, where people are coming up with great new brand names, really innovative brand names. And the consideration then is, what language will this be will this be mainly spoken in? Visually, how will people look at it? If you're launching a brand, I remember launching a brand probably 10 years ago and launching it into the Chinese market, and the client brand in the UK was very much black, and that was that was the brand type, the brand style in the UK. But you try and take a brand that's black into a different market, and that has a completely different connotation. And so you have to think about the colorways. You have to think about what is a positive color. How can that brand represent in different jurisdictions? How will that brand be seen? So it's looking at the brand, where the brand stable is coming from. If it's an existing business, is there already registered, brand considerations? If it's a completely new brand, what might sound like a super funky, great .com name in the UK, EMEA, might not translate when you go global. And of course, as you guys know better than anybody, with any sort of online brand, you are talking instantly to a global audience, because your market is, and we've seen it in the past 12 months more than ever, how markets, people will be buying from what might be a domiciled UK business, but, your audience is everywhere. So it's really important to think about those considerations of the language, the naming, the audience, and again, how far and where that brand is going to sit. Is it going to be an online brand? Is it a physical brand?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's really, really interesting area, and even in the domestic market, obviously colours and such like convey different conceptual ideas and evoke different emotions, things which I know you've spoken about in the past. And I think the point about the online world, particularly post-COVID and during COVID, it's become such a big thing, hasn't it? And we can't escape the fact that the social media channels are so important today. I know we'll come on to talk about what that means in terms of being able to protect your brand, but I guess we should start from the beginning here, really, and ask Rian, why is it important to protect a brand? What are we talking about? I think we probably should deal with the terminology piece really first, because you hear people say, I'm going to patent it, I'm going to copyright it, I'm going to trademark it. So it would be helpful to have a conversation about that, I think. And then, maybe Rian, you could explain to us, what do trademarks do, and why do we want to look at protecting a brand with a trademark registration, for example?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of sort of the terminology, a patent is basically something that protects your nuts and bolts, your actual physical product. Copyright is quite often used interchangeably or perhaps incorrectly in connection with the brand. I mean, a brand can be protected by copyright, but in essence, that really sort of goes to the nut of protecting the creative elements, for example, the literary elements, the artistic, the artwork, and how those sort of creative elements that go in behind a brand. Trademark is in effect the legal term for a brand. It's what we use to basically say this is your brand identifier, and this is the legal term around that. And the reason why trademarks are really important is, well, they're actually an asset for your business. They tell people who you are, and they embody all of your cultural messaging and your brand identity. And they can actually be listed as an asset on your balance sheet as a business. They act as the marker in the sand and tell your competitors, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, and this is what we do, as well as your consumers. And they help distinguish consumers from your competitors as well. In terms of, sorry, go on, Simon.
Well, I thought you were pausing there for a minute. But I was going to say, I think that's it probably is a good point to pause, because I think that's absolutely fundamental here, isn't it? That and it's fundamental to being able to protect a trademark as well, to understand that trademarks distinguish one person's business from another. That's really what gives you a competitive edge here. And also it's very important in terms of being able to protect a trademark, because in order to protect it, it needs to be capable of distinguishing one person's goods or services from another. Sorry for interrupting you, but I think that is a really good point just to emphasize there. So tell us about the registration process. Well,
you touched upon it there about making sure that the trademark itself is distinguishable, but the legal testing is to make sure that your trademark is distinctive and it's not descriptive of your product offering, of the goods and services that you're going to be using your trademark on. So a really, really basic example would be that you can't use the word table as your trademark and get protection for furniture, as that's just not distinctive and it's entirely descriptive of what you do. Really strong trademarks should be coined by you. The best ones are made up, or at most they're elusive of what you're offering. So Facebook is a great one because you can't really tell from the words Facebook what it is. Innocent for smoothies, and also Instagram as well. All of these are sort of made up words, or just allude to the characteristics of what your product is. I think that's probably also really important as well from a marketing point, Andy, as well, as making sure that the trademark itself embodies what those cultural messages are. But absolutely, moving on from that as well, is that you need to think about the scope of your protection. We've referred to goods and services, and you actually have to fix your protection in your application form. You have to physically list those goods and services in the application. So it's really important to know what it is that you're going to be doing, and then also what you intend to be doing in the future, because once you file your application, that protection is fixed and you can't expand it in future. You have to then effectively refile. So it's thinking and talking to people like us so we can understand what you want to do now and what you want to do in future, to make sure that we in effect future proof any applications that you file.
That's really interesting. And Andy, do you have any observations on that? Because I guess the scope of the goods and services is quite relevant to think about when you're devising a brand.
Absolutely, Simon. Just a thought as well. I mean, just picking up on that, Ian, that we find working with Freets at OWB, we find working really early on with you guys in the brand process is vital. Because the earlier that, as a creative, you can come up with the most wild, wacky, fantastic, but if it can't be protected, there's no point getting everybody excited, the chief exec, the CMO, the chairman, everybody's on board with this thing. And then to suddenly go, actually, you know what, we can't use it because it is being used or whatever. So I think engaging with a firm like Freets from OWB's perspective early on in the process is critical, because we might as well know early on, and we save any sort of, wasting time. I think the other thing as well, that just picking up on the other point about that, certainly going into social media and going into things like Instagram, like you said, Rian, quite often you will have a brand piece, but you might then have to create a separate sub-brand for the Twitter handle or the Instagram handle or whatever. So it's again thinking through that whole legal protection. I'm not just protecting the brand OWB or Freets. I want to protect everything around that as a package, because if I get one chink that I haven't thought about in the armor, then suddenly, the whole piece can be, open to sort of the market and open to competition and stuff. So it's really important to engage with a legal firm from a creative mind really, really early on in the process.
Yes, that's sorry, Simon.
No, you go ahead, Rin.
Well, I was just going to add that's one of the considerations that we have when we first talk to someone is, well, exactly how are you going to be using it? And is it in conjunction with a strapline, or is it in conjunction with the logo, or all three? Because as what you put in that application form, as I said, that's what's fixed. That's what you've put that marker in the sand. And it could well be that the best advice would be we do a suite of trademark applications subject to budget, and how we prioritise and when you do those different applications. And it may well be that the scope of goods and services that you include for one particular trademark is actually different for another. For example, your house brand would have the kitchen sink in it, but it may well be that a particular tagline is only used in relation to certain services or products. So we can then help tailor how you put those goods and services in relation to which trademarks and make sure that they fit the purpose.
Yeah,
absolutely.
What I was going to say was just pick up on Andy's point and to some extent yours as well, Rian, in that this tension between wanting to use, it's particularly in the online space, wanting to use something that is descriptive, because in order to navigate to the goods and services that you're offering, you really have to describe what they are. But the tension between that and being able to actually protect that as part of the brand is difficult because it doesn't fit within the trademark model. So I think when you mention taglines, Arian, that's where that kind of comes in, and where Andy kind of has to be even more creative in terms of being able to have that distinctive brand, but also be able to educate the consumer or the market as to actually what it is you're offering here, because domain names that are more descriptive in nature tend to be more successful, correct me if I'm wrong, because from an SEO point of view, they're probably more amenable. I don't know whether you've got some to say on that, Andy. I mean, we could talk for ages about it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the sort of domain name piece. I mean, more often than not now with domains that we are, we are making a truly directional domain name, and quite often it's to a campaignable piece of a brand. So you might have the holding brand, but we really want to focus on, a specific call to action or a specific event or a specific campaign. So that whole domain piece, and quite often you will see, and I know working with you guys, that we might have a multitude of domains registered alongside that brand. And it might not, there might be the core URL, which might be the organization, the .org.uk or .com or .co.uk, but we'll have a number of brand-led domain registrations which are linked to, and quite often we'll have then the brand within that domain. So it's really, I think it's quite often an overlooked piece. There are also a few scurrilous domain agencies that the minute you search on a domain, what a surprise, that domain is taken, even though it was free 10 minutes ago. And how does this happen? So it's trying to be clever, working as a partnership, working to the benefit of the client. So they really see some value in legal and creative working together. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be, it's a partnership. It gets the best value. It protects the client. It delivers the ROI, it delivers the creative, but it really, it's at the beginning, everybody is assured that their domain, their brand, their registration, their strap is all protected from the offset.
And that's planning and looking forward, isn't it, Rian? And I think we're probably missing a really, well, we're not missing it because we're talking about it, but perhaps we should highlight that actually what we're saying here is you need to think beyond the brand per se. It's about getting hold of those social media names, the domain names. And indeed, when we do a full clearance piece, we can actually work with OWB and yourself from time to time to actually look at what is available there. Again, getting that groundwork done properly. But Rian, it's thinking to me. I'm thinking, do you want to say something about why the trademark registration is quite important in the online context here as well, and securing those rights?
Definitely. So trademark registration is king, really, in enforcing and protecting a brand. The UK is quite unique. Not many other countries are like the UK that we do recognise unregistered rights, but fundamentally, if you've got that certificate that you can wave in someone's face and say, no, I can stop you from doing that, whether that's through the courts or other. The other important thing with trademark registration is that lots of e-commerce platforms, your Facebooks, your socials like Instagram, they will only recognise and actually activate any takedown procedures if you have a registration in place. It's also really important for other sorts of enforcement actions, for example, through counterfeits. It's a lot easier for border force to actually take action if they've got something tangible to look at, a certificate to look at and say, I've got a right here to stop you from doing that. So trademark registration isn't just about going through, spending loads of money going through the courts. It's really important to be able to do takedowns that you can manage yourself, enforcement actions that you can take yourself, in order to get the best protection for your brand overall and to maintain and keep its integrity.
Yeah, and even things like customs seizure, if you've got products that are moving across borders, the trademark registration, or indeed other intellectual property rights like design registrations and the like are important, which, we probably don't have time for today, but the designs are also can be part of a brand. I don't know whether you've got any experience there, Andy, in terms of thinking of branding as a design as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think, larger organizations tend to have already thought about these things, the critical mass. And I think the critical here is your startup entrepreneurial brands that want to get to market really quickly and are not thinking about sometimes are not thinking about the whole design piece. This is exactly what Rian said earlier. This is actually it's an asset of my business. So let's think about this at the beginning. Let's think about this at the inception, and let's make sure it's knitted into our DNA of our business.
Okay, so we've talked about brand considerations, about clearance being really crucial and getting that done early. We've talked about protecting that investment that you're going to make in the new brand. We've touched on defending that investment through ensuring that the rights can help you deal with takedowns or customs seizure or whatever it might be. What are the perhaps we should think about the sort of things that you do then to maximize the value of the brand and really to flog the brand to work for you, both in terms of I guess it overlaps with the defense piece a little bit, the kind of things that we do, Rian, but also, from Andy's perspective, how do we really once we've got all these things in place, how do we really get value out of them and make sure that we protect that value? Who wants to go first? I mean, it's a broad question, but.
Well, I just picking up on the I mean, once from our perspective, from OWB, from the creative perspective, protecting the value is how that brand is used. I mean, we do create brands. There have been, situations where brands are created and they are sort of, domiciled because they're created as almost a protection for something that is future-proof that might be coming down the line. But creating the value is where that brand is being used and what kind of media, if it's going to go with TV, across, if it's going to be oral, if it's going to be across, digital. And that's creating the value in the brand, how that brand is being used and how widely that brand is being used, and where that brand is being used, which is quite critical.
Yeah. And the longevity of the brand is quite an interesting question from a legal perspective as well, Ian, isn't it? Because maybe you want to talk about, what value you get out of trademark registrations per se, because they can last for a long time, right?
Yeah, I mean, compared to lots of other registrable intellectual property rights, trademarks are actually great value because they initially last for 10 years, but actually if you renew them every 10 years, they can last indefinitely. So I think one of the oldest trademarks is the Bash Triangle, and that was registered 150 years ago now, and it's still going strong, it's still used, still relied upon. So it really is one of those things that is relatively cost effective for the strength that it gives you and the rights that it gives you to maintain and protect your brand. The other thing that we offer that I think it's really important that is another arsenal to protect and maintain your brand as well, watching services. So once you've got your registration, we can offer watching services, whether that's watching other trademark registers to try and find out what other people are doing, domain watching services, social media, just to see if other people are encroaching on your brand and actually making an assessment as to whether that impeaches on what you want to do and whether you want to take action or not, as I said, in order to maintain the integrity of your brand as well. It's a really key piece to do post-registration.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Because trademarks are things that distinguish you, it's kind of important to make sure that you ring fence them and other people don't trespass on the brand by getting close with either identical or similar brands. And so, you know, we keep our eyes and ears open for clients in that respect. And
I would have just thought, just very recently, Simon and Rian, that the rugby league teams must have been wondering about the use of the Super League in a certain European competition that seems to be have gone nowhere. Maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, this is really interesting stuff, but I don't think we've actually got that much longer with our half an hour. So maybe some closing thoughts, key messages, Andy.
Absolutely. Well, I think I would say from my perspective, when creating a brand from a creative point of view, work early with your legal team. You know, OWB and Freaks, we've got a great relationship working together. Work early because it saves a lot of pain, saves a lot of heartache, and it also as well can open up an opportunity where you can see something that isn't protected and you think, great, we can go for that.
Yeah, I'd reiterate that. It's really important, as again, from a cost management perspective as well. And also, you don't want to get down the line where you have set your heart on a brand, you've 6, 12, even 2-3 years down the line of using and you're trading, and then someone to come out of the woodwork and go, hang on a minute, you can't use that, I don't like it. And then you have to then spend time and money re-educating or developing a new brand and then re-educating your customers as well.
Perfect. So key messages. Get the great team together first. Think about it ahead of time. Don't invest in something that's a non-starter, which is why you need that team. Protect the investment, defend the investment, and then work to make the best of it with the help that you've got on hand. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Rian, for your time this morning. I think that closes it. I think there's going to be some further information put out through the recording that we've got with the Business Brunch. But from us this morning, it's goodbye. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.